Hi, welcome to my channel. Hi, welcome to my channel. It's been a while since I did a sit down video, so this feels a little strange, but in a good way. My name is Audrey. I am a writer, teacher, editor, lover, reader of fiction. On this channel, I share my creative writing journey. I am currently working on a novel, and I've also been working on short stories. I moved to the US a few years ago to do my MFA at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and then now I'm done and I'm teaching and I'm working on my novel in hopes that it has huge publication success and I can achieve my dream of being this huge star writer. All right, so I don't usually talk about books because I feel kind of nervous about, I don't know, I just always feel like there's a certain way in which I'm expected to talk about books, and so I just shy away from doing it. But then I'm trying to revive my reading habits for February, and so I just thought, well, I should share the books that I just went to get from the library a few days ago. First book is The Fawn by Magda Szabo. This is a New York Review of Books translation that was done by Len Ricks, who has also translated three of her other books. That is The Door, Abigail, and Catalan Street, three of which I actually haven't read. This is the first Magda Szabo book that I'm about to read. And I actually have started, I've read only about 20 pages, but I'm enjoying this so far. I'm enjoying the voice of this book so far. The voice is that of the protagonist Esther, who is a very successful theater actress currently in Hungary. She grew up in a provincial town in Hungary. Her mom was a struggling music teacher and her dad was a flower breeder, apparently a very eccentric aristocrat. And they grew up in abject poverty, which she absolutely hated and wanted to get out of. Mind you, in the background, this is 1940s Hungary. Hitler is about to succeed in annexing the country. There's occupying forces everywhere. There's the complete bombardment of Budapest until it's reduced to rubble, and the Soviets are about to take over. And Esther is absolutely determined to use this political warfare and upheaval as an opportunity to get out of the destitution that she grew up in. And so in university, she stars in this production, which was specifically selected to please the occupying forces. She becomes very successful. She moves out into the suburbs and she buys a house. She falls in love with a married man who is this translator of Shakespeare and other writers that Esther is interested in. And he is the husband of a woman that Esther grew up with, whom Esther absolutely hates. The book spans 3 decades. I'd call it a consular roman or a coming of age of an artist of sorts. And we're taken through her life from when she was a child and, she was living in absolute poverty. She barely had any food on most days and didn't even have good shoes to take to school. And you can tell that this is a very vengeful and angry and spiteful kid who is also very aroused by the idea of destruction. And she's very intrigued by even the idea of, all the communities and cities around her being bombed and raided, the thought of her childhood home being raided. She hates anybody who is vulnerable and soft because she feels like she never had the privilege to even be vulnerable or soft because of the circumstances that she grew up in. Len Ricks, in his introduction, he says, "She is certainly no moral exemplar. Playful and quick-witted she may be, but she is capable of saying and doing wicked and even horrifying things. And yet somehow she never quite forfeits our sympathy, and the manner of her ending, as appalling as it is, touches on the sublime." And there is a you that she constantly addresses in this monologue throughout the book, and I guess we find out who this you is towards the end. And you can just tell this is a sort of monologue where her mind is turning on itself and she's basically trying to make sense of her entire life up until this point. She has made it in life, but just has so much spite and scorn in her heart because of how she grew up and stuff. This was published in 1959, and this comes after a 10-year period of Magda Szabo actually being banned by the government from publishing anything. Next, we have No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This is a Japanese novel that was published in 1948. I actually made such a sweet mistake because this is actually manga by Junji Ito based on the novel and not the novel itself. When I was ordering it from the library, I thought I was getting the book itself. But then I'm excited also because I think just like trying to read manga from start to finish and being able to immerse myself in the work like in this form would make me excited for reading again. The novel is written in first person, is narrated by the protagonist named Yozo, and the book takes the form of notebooks and journal entries. So Yozo is a miserable man who doesn't quite understand himself, doesn't understand society and human beings, and is very fearful of society. He says, "Wasn't society simply the individual? In which case, wasn't it something worth being so fearful of?" I would say this is a modernist sort of confessional type of novel, a coming of age, a Bildungsroman. Like, we're taken through his entire life. We have an account of a young man's life from childhood to adulthood, and we see scenes or moments where he experiences all kinds of abuse from various sorts of people that he believed that he could trust. And when he's in high school, he now becomes a clown or the Joker, or he takes on very different forms and different ways in which he can mask himself so he can separate himself from the perception of the world. As he gets older, there's a moment in his adult life where he does attempt to take his life and fails. So much like the title suggests, no longer human, he feels like, well, he is no longer human. And there's a quote that I had seen in another part of it also where he says, "Mine has been a life of so much shame, and I can't even guess what it must be like to live the life of a human being." I love a bleak book. I love I love bleak media, and I feel like Japanese media, like Japanese artists, just execute the idea of existentialism and nihilism and self-destruction and bleak world situations just so well. Like, you watch AOT and you're just like, oh my god, like, humanity is so evil. Eren should just wipe out the entire world and let's all just die and not exist, because human beings are the worst thing to ever happen to the world. I'm looking forward to reading it because this is much like books that I really enjoy: meditation on the self versus society, meditation on existentialism, like I had mentioned, nihilism, loneliness, alienation, all the good bleak stuff. The next book I intend to read is White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I have read her essays, I listen to her interviews constantly. I'm so in awe of this woman. I am very intrigued by her. I watch so many interviews of hers, honestly, sometimes just to listen to the timbre of her voice and just the way she carries herself. She's so smart. I'm intrigued by her sensibility. I would read anything she writes. She's probably like a controversial character or so. Yeah, I've read Swing Time because, some writers that I trust said Swing Time is her best book, and I read that. I haven't read White Teeth. This is my first time. White Teeth is her debut novel. It was published in 2000. It's a multi-generational saga following the lives of families in London, and it follows the friendship of these two men called Archie Jones and Samad Iqbal. Archie is a World War II veteran, so this book spans the period, kind of like the Fawn by Magda. Also, this was set around World War II, and it spans the period from World War II to the 90s. And Archie is a World War II veteran who, at some point, tries to take his life. Everybody's trying to take their life, and but then at some point he finds a renewed sense of purpose and hope in life again when he unexpectedly falls in love with and marries this Jamaican woman called Clara, who's trying to escape her very hyper-religious upbringing. This book apparently explores a lot of religion. And in the community that they're living in, they become neighbors with this Bangladeshi family. And the father in that family is Samad Iqbal, who becomes close friends with Archie. And so throughout the book, these two families come together, and then the book sort of explores the friendships and tensions between these two families, and then through their relations with each other, they come to terms with concerns of multicultural differences, of race, of identity, of love, of friendship in modern day London. People say that Zadie Smith's writing has changed so much, but I'm like, well, what do you expect? Like White Teeth, she wrote when she was pretty young. She wrote when she was 19. It got published eventually when she was 24. There was a whole bidding war and everything. And, it has the fervor and anger and sense of hope of youth. And I think her work now is much more toned down and just has a more maybe mature and refined sensibility, like I would say. I think maybe people might disagree. Some people say that White Teeth was her best work. I think Swing Time was her best work, although I haven't read White Teeth yet. And yeah, she's just one of those writers where I'm just like, do I envy you or do I admire you, or is envying you and admiring you, like, are they one and the same thing? Are they one and the same thing? But I enjoy anything that Zadie Smith writes, and so I'm really looking forward to reading YT.
Fall in love again, fall in love again and again, fall in love again and again, fall in love again.
Next up is The Rings of Saturn by W.G. Sebald. This is a book that was published in 1995, and like White Teeth by Zadie Smith was also set in England. The protagonist is somebody who loves to take walks, so at the beginning, the protagonist, begins the novel taking a walk on the east coast of England. As he is walking, he's walking also during a time of deep, deep depression. At the start of the novel, it says, in August 1992, when the dog days were drawing to an end, I set off to walk the county of Suffolk in the hope of dispelling the emptiness that takes hold of me whenever I have completed a long stint of work. So while he's walking, he's observing the most mundane things. He could be observing, people taking a walk on the side of the streets, a Dutch elm tree, a building that has been destroyed or was destroyed so many years ago. And from those focal points of perception, he now goes on a long tirade or a long thought pattern about the history that he knows and understands about the things that he just saw, anthropological observations of phenomena that he's seeing, and just, present moments like sentiments about stuff or memory. The vignettes throughout the book are accompanied by actual photos. There's one section here also where, he's going on a walk again. He says, the rain clouds had dispersed when, after dinner, I took my first walk around the streets and lanes of the town. Darkness was falling, and only the lighthouse with its shining glass cabins still caught the last luminous rays that came in from the western horizon. And over here too, like the picture of the lighthouse that he's looking at and talking about is right down here. When I look through the book and I just see all these photos and just see all the vignettes also that are kind of based on the photos and stuff that he's seeing, it kind of makes me think of ekphrastic poetry, which is kind of like poetry that you write based off of a very close study of a painting or a sort of scene or a landscape or photo or whatsoever. And I understand why this book has been recommended to me a couple of times. I've read bits and pieces of his work. This is my first time I'm going to be reading a full book by Sebald. He is a German writer who is very praised for his experimentation with form. He's very interested in, like very meandering sentences that could span a page or two, which makes sense also because, the protagonists are also usually taking very meandering routes and then thinking very random, disconnected, seemingly fragmented things. I think this is reminiscent of books and work that I like to read and work that I particularly like to write also, that is interested in form and interested in playing with the sentence, is interested in the playing also with kind of hybridizing like the form of the essay into fiction writing, because I think here there isn't necessarily a traditional arc of a story necessarily. It's mostly following the psyche and observations of this one particular person, and it's many different fragmented vignettes like all throughout the book, but then it takes on the form of the essay. Yeah, a kind of essayistic exploration of things that he is seeing and thinking about, which I find really, really interesting. And I think sometimes also even just constantly reading what a protagonist or a character says or thinks about a thing that they see can say much more about them and about their lives and about their character than, I don't know, just putting them in a scene and having them do things. It's snowing outside and it's snowing the whole day. But yeah, the last book I intend to read is Every Day is for the Thief by Teju. This was published in 2007. Teju is a Nigerian writer who is popularly known for his work Open City, but this is actually his debut and I don't think it's talked about as much. And I haven't read it yet also, which is why I picked it up. I'm also very curious to see where his head was at when he was writing his debut. I'm usually very interested in that. This book is also following a young Nigerian writer who returns home to Lagos after being in New York for 15 years. And this is incited by a huge fight that he has with his mom and the death of his father. Much like Sebald's protagonist, the narrator of this book also, is taking walks and then moving around the city and then making observations of the most mundane things. And, from even just observing like an old building or people on public transit or teenagers playing or doing fraud in an internet cafe, just from those focal points of observation, the narrator, goes on a whole tale or narration about personal history, about national history, about memory and sentiments and things like that. And it also is kind of, it sort of takes the form of the essay, like I was saying with Rings of Saturn, for example. And I'm trying not to draw too many parallels between both works, but I can definitely see certain influences from Sebald's work in Teju's work. Like there's different vignettes, like I had said, the protagonist is also meandering and walking around, and there's also photos also in here. But while I'm reading, I'm going to try not to draw too many comparisons and just take this book for what it is. The title also, Every Day is for the Thief, is taken from a longer proverb or saying in Yoruba, which loosely translates to every day is for the thief, but one day is for the owner. I believe that's what it is, which mainly I think is connected to him exploring issues also of all the observations that he has about crime and corruption in the country, because this basically means, like the thief or the wrongdoer can keep doing wrong every day, but then one day the owner or justice will catch up to him. And so he comes home and then he's observing, crime and corruption, and just observing how things have or have not changed since he left almost 2 decades ago. And all these personal reflections obviously like come back to himself in a form of introspection, where he's also trying to make sense of how he himself has also changed, and how the version of himself now returning home is very different from what was there before, and drawing this relationship between the self and place also, where he's also now observing, how the place has changed so much, or like also observing how maybe certain things might have not changed at all. But yeah, I'm excited to read this. I'm excited to read all the other books that I have. I think that this is going to help with the reading slump that I have been in. I think my relationship with reading has really changed over the years, and I spent a very long time just really studying work for the sake of studying, and now I just really want to rebuild the love for reading's sake. So hopefully this is going to do it. Thank you for watching. Comment down below what books you might be interested in reading, or what you've read out of this list already, or any other books that you're reading. Please subscribe, leave a comment, like, and please share this video so I can grow my new channel. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week.